Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I've spoken at a couple of COBA events before, but I'm sure that, that there's a lot more people here. My name's Caris Young. I look after all things tech talent within Gusto. Gusto, for those who don't know, are sponsoring this event. I'm really excited to be a part of this. You will see some food-related things come up as I go through this presentation. We are big foodies here, but basically what I'm here to do is talk through the recipe for your first job. And my unique perspective of that is from a recruitment angle and being a recruiter. So I've been in recruitment for a number of years now, all within the tech space. I've seen every role you can possibly think of, from data science to IT services to agile coaches to infrastructure to everything. So I've looked through the full gamut of tech roles. And the interesting thing about being a recruiter is I've done that all without having any knowledge on how to do them myself. So I think it's really useful for you guys in your quest for your first jobs to know what the first person and the first port of call that looks at your interview is thinking, and some tips and tricks from that perspective. So I'll run through. There's plenty of time for questions in the end, so please do bring them in. I want this to be as bespoke as possible. So you can see the food theme here. So the basic ingredients and how to stand out in your application. As a recruiter, for any normal role, I probably get around 500 to 600 applications a week. Do not be put off by that, but it's a fact that I think is important for people to know when they're looking for their first jobs, because what we're really trying to do with that CV, with that cover letter, is stand out and be really clear in why and how we think we're good for this role. So some tips I have for you within the protein is, firstly, on your CV, the key thing at the top here is don't overshare all of your contact details. So as long as we can get back in touch with you with an email address, with a phone number, with a LinkedIn profile, whatever it may be, they're really the key things that we want you to have on the top of that CV. The more you put in, truthfully, you may get caught by recruitment agencies, which I'm sure some people have experience with. You may get caught by people that are just harvesting data. So be careful about who you're sharing your contact details with. The second one is using words in the correct context. I know this feels granular, but this is so, so important. I want to know what you did and what your role in certain things were, as opposed to what we did or the team did. I'm interested in who you were. We're not interviewing your whole team. We're interested in what you're up to in this. So words like worked on, led, managed, all of those things tell me what your perspective in that particular one was. We versus I is a really big deliberator. You have to help me understand what your role in that was, because I don't necessarily know, as a recruiter or as all the recruiters that are filtering through CVs, I don't necessarily know who and where and what that thing is that you've been working on. So I need you to really take me through and tell me the story of your specific involvement in that. The third one here kind of sinks into that, outlining your responsibilities and your achievements. A lot of people can fall into the trap of writing their CV as a number of job descriptions. So a lead developer, for example, and just writing what a lead developer does on a day-to-day basis within that company. It's great. It tells me whether or not your job is similar to my job that I'm looking for. And that's really useful, I suppose. But what's more useful, if you can add these onto it, is actually writing what you've achieved whilst you've been in that position. So whether you have created or worked on a project that's been really significant to budget, or whether you pulled something really early on a deadline, or something similar to that. I want to know what you did well in your job, and also as well as the responsibilities. Tailoring your CV. Someone spoke about this earlier in terms of sending 2 CVs. However you want to tailor your CV, please tailor your CV. The amount of people and the amount of applications I've had that have left really relevant things that I know are for other companies, or even the other companies' names in. I mean, that's more of a cover letter thing, but different things that I can tell they've tailored it, but they haven't tailored it to me and my role and what I'm looking for. I think that's really, really important, because you can make yourself seem even more relevant job by job. Not all 2 jobs are the same. So if my role is looking for one particular tool or framework, so-and-so's role may not be. So just make sure if you have those, you're really honing in on what's specifically relevant to each role. And then keep it clean and concise. Come back to that stat of, I see quite a few CVs on a daily basis as a recruiter. What's really key here is that it's kept clean. Please don't do that thing that people say where they say, keep your CV to 1 page. It doesn't need to be 1 page, because actually what that does is pull loads of information into a really busy space. But make sure that your experience is outlined, that your academia is outlined, that your skill sets are outlined, maybe that your technology is outlined, and it all has its place and it all fits in nicely and tells the story of who you are, what you're looking for, and sort of any relevant experience that you have. So I'd say there's some quick tips and tricks from a recruiter on your CV. For cover letter, and yes, I do think we should still do cover letters. It's a contested area in the recruitment world, but I think they can be really useful for basically giving a blurb for your CV. So all of the things that a CV outlines, putting a little bit of personality on top of that doesn't hurt. And yes, we do read them as well as recruiters. I think that's important to know. But like I say at the first one, this is your hello. This is the time to introduce yourself, to maybe talk to us about what you're looking for and your motivations for a new role, how you've come across us, for example. So that 3rd bullet point there, showing your interest in our company. How did you come across Gusto, for example, or any other company that you're applying for? What brought you into my inbox? Again, tailoring your cover letter. This feels really like a lot of work to do for each of your individual applications. And some of you may be applying to multiple roles a day. But I think tailoring these things just they tip you over that edge of people that aren't doing this. And the 4th point that I've put on cover letter can be a really useful way to get that workload down. I don't mind if you use ChatGPT, as long as when you read over what AI has written for you, and it makes sense and it correlates and it's relevant to who you are. This is a really great way that we can do a lot of work in a much shorter time. At Gusto, we're actively looking for ways to, how can we implement AI? How can we use ChatGPT to be more productive? So what a strange thing it would be if for us to say, actually, we don't like it when candidates use them in applications. If anything, it's quite a good way to just get that productivity up and that workload down. So that's really the core of what you're looking at when you're looking at an application. Just a few tips or tricks there. I know that there's been a lot in the previous talks, which has been incredibly helpful, that I've been watching as well. And then don't forget about LinkedIn. As a recruiter, I would say I spend 4 to 5 hours a day on LinkedIn, probably, whether that's reaching out to people that look right for the roles that I have, or conversing with the people that are reaching out about the roles that we have as well. So just a few tips and tricks on here. I'm going to hone in on a couple because I want to make sure that we've got more than enough time afterwards for questions. But making sure that your open to work is on. What that does in the back end of LinkedIn for recruiters is it pings up in a special category. So that will be their priority people, because you're open to work, we're looking for someone who's looking for work. Those two things seem to make a match. So make sure that you always have that on if you're looking for it. There is an option where you can say, put my open to work on, but don't show anyone that you're currently looking for. That won't matter so much in your first tech job, but if you're interning and you don't want them to know, pop that one on. Include your role changes and promotions, maybe not for your first tech job, but for any other tech jobs, for the career changes that are potentially listening in. All of your different roles within different things. It shows us your progression. It shows us what you can do, and that other places value those transferable skills as well. So I'm definitely looking at that when I'm looking at my career changes. And then finally, just making sure that your skills part, I mean, all of these are relevant, but making sure that your skills part is really well defined. So we're looking for your languages, your tools, what accreditations have you done? There's lots of accreditations on LinkedIn that might be worth looking at for people. What ones of those have you done, and where can you put those on your profile as well? So a few tips and tricks here. I make sure hopefully Kimberly can send this round, or Kevin can send this round, but we'll see what happens. just my LinkedIn as well for anyone that wants to connect. And also, as a recruiter, I'd say I have a pretty good baseline for what a good LinkedIn profile looks like. So feel free to use this link or copy this link and jump on. Again, I'll put it in the chat, or I'll ask someone to put it in the chat afterwards. So the recruiter screen, I'm sure people may or may not have been through a recruiter screen before. To introduce a recruiter screen is of anything from 15 to 30 to 40-minute conversation right at the beginning of the interview process. They tend to be the first person you speak to. And they are not a technical person. They're by no means the hiring manager for the role. They are just people like me who are employed to make sure that the right people are going through to the right stages. My job isn't to do technology, it's to employ really great technology people. And so I wanted to run through a little bit of what you should expect from a recruiter screen and how you can prepare for one, because they can be a little bit more tricky. I love this quote from Greg, hiring an attitude, not just experience or qualification. I think all that's been said about nerves and everything is absolutely spot on. Don't worry about all of that. We're not trying in a recruiter screen to get to the hardcore experiences or qualifications we have. It's really much more about that wider understanding experience, the conversation that happens. I hesitate to use the terms culture fit, but we're looking for, can this person work well with our company values, and is that something that's going to be right for them as well? Because as we all know, interviews are very much two-way processes. So what is a recruiter screen? A recruiter screen can be a number of things, but generally in my experience, they are one of these 5 things, if not all of these 5 things. So from the bottom up, probably actually would be the way in which you can expect them to happen. Probably should have structured them that way, but there we are. So finding out a little bit more about you. What was your experience? What have you been up to? Why are you interested in the role? How have you looked at the job description and found the relevance between yourself and what we're looking for? And just talking through all that to make sure that for our teams, the baseline of the understanding of, how you relate to the role makes sense. We will check what I like to call the logistics of the role. That's what we're there to do. So anything like motivations for applying to role, location, we'll know what hybrid working can be for different companies, making sure that that works for you, what your notice period is if you have one, what your interview availability is if you have one. I'll come on to salary expectations quickly afterwards, because I think that's one to dwell on. Right to works in the UK. Can they sponsor a candidate? Can they not sponsor a candidate? All of these things that are really important for you from a candidate perspective to know, rather than a future tech professional. That's really, really what the recruiter is trying to do. The goal of a successful recruiter screen from the back end as a recruiter is to be able to recommend a profile to a hiring manager and say, these are the reasons I think X is a great option, but also we don't have to worry about any of the logistics. They're covered. We've checked, and actually on paper, both us and the candidate could fit the role really nicely. So that's what you can expect from a recruiter screen. Now, the big one is obviously the salary question. I probably get more questions on how to talk about salaries and whether to talk about them or be open or wait till they tell you. It's probably the topic of conversation I get most questions on when we talk about this. I've put a few tips in there for you. But the first thing and the most important thing I would say is don't worry about speaking about salaries, particularly with a recruiter. If you have a good recruiter, they talk about salaries day in, day out. It's become such a frequent conversation that there's no awkwardness on their part, even though it is a sensitive topic of conversation. But if you get a good recruiter, you should be able to lean on them for this. My recommendation from my experience is don't give a number first. So know what the market rate is. Know where you're comfortable. Absolutely. You should know around about what banding you are comfortable in and what numbers you're looking for. However, don't write it in an application form. Don't say this amount without any input from them. If you possibly can, your best question to ask a recruiter at that stage is ask them what the salary banding they are. And if they say they haven't got a salary banding, well, what numbers are you currently interviewing other candidates at, so that I can check that my market research fits in with that. There is nothing wrong with asking that question. And if anything, you are doing yourself a service by asking it. You want to make sure that you aren't giving a number that maybe is much, much lower than they're willing to offer. You want to make sure that you're paid adequately for the skills that they're asking for. That's so important. And I think whether it's your first ever role, your first tech role, your 7th tech role, you're a C-suite, people still come and ask me these questions of when should I talk about it? When does it feel appropriate? As soon as you can, and do it knowing that they definitely have a number that's in their mind already. Also, don't forget to ask about the entire benefits package. Sometimes the salary is, obviously the salary is important, but I think the whole package of what you're going for. So you can have shares or share options or bonus structures or holiday days or whatever is important to you. You need to make sure that in that recruiter screen, you're really getting that from the person that you're speaking to. Finishing touches, using a recruiter to your advantage. So the role of a recruiter, as I said, is not to be an expert in tech. So how can you use that relationship to your best advantage? A recruiter will book all of your interviews generally, or maybe a recruitment coordinator will, but someone in the recruitment team generally will book your interviews for you if they're a company that has a big TA team within them or a reasonable TA team in them. That will normally be the way that it happens. Making sure you catch up on your feedback throughout. Your recruiter is your main point of contact to get feedback. If you've not heard from anyone, hound your recruiter. If you haven't got enough feedback or you need to talk through some feedback that you maybe disagree with, hound your recruiter. That's really where you leverage that relationship. Salary check-ins. I know we just spoke about doing it at the start, but check in on those topics of conversation as you continue to go through the process. Make sure that that still feels right, that that's still what they're offering, that they're still comfortable around that number, so that there's no surprises when you get to the end of recruitment process and lo and behold, it's the number that you've been discussing all along. The offer process and salary negotiations generally are held by a recruiter as well. Reason just being that that's what we're there to do, right? We're there to make the hire happen. And that is a part of making the hire happen. If it doesn't quite go so well, recruiters are always the best person to keep in touch for any future relevant roles as well. So can you add me to a community pool? Can you add me to a reading list or a touch point list if you're comfortable with that, for any future relevant roles that you have in the business? And finally, keep in touch with your recruiters. Recruiters can be really, really useful people. There are a lot of them out there. Some are good, some are bad, as with most things. But a good recruiter will move around and will take you with them. So if you are great and have done great, which I'm sure you all are, and you get in touch and get really close to that recruiter, when they go, they will have you in mind for their next roles. And so the more good recruiters that you can connect with, in my opinion, the better. But obviously I am slightly biased, so that's something to consider. I'm going to wrap up there and hopefully Kimberly or Kevin jump back on, just because I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for questions and everything like that.